Hey everyone, and welcome to this very special episode of Only Dan's. This is the Christmas special, and we have a very special few guests to join us. It's a bit like the bit where Bernard Sumner joins together with Pete Hook, and we get the Beer Farmers. Hey everyone, how are you doing?
All right.
Good. Yep.
Not too.
We have Mike Thompson, Scott McGrady, and Ian Thornton Trump from the original band lineup. Who would like to explain what the Beer Farmers can be future-wise?
Should be dead quick, that, because there's no future for it. No, but in seriousness, we formed in 2017 as a group of friends, really, all in different cyber disciplines. It started on the back of Ian and I meeting at B-Sides in Manchester, which is a community conference in hiatus at the moment. But Ian was presenting and I went along to his talk. We met, we became friends, and then we started fooling around on social media. And the fooling around really was to try and inject a little bit of lightheartedness into a quite a heavy industry. We're in an industry that's quite dark in places, and at times some of the characters in the industry probably take themselves a little bit too seriously. And what Ian and I thought was, why don't we just try and have a laugh with it? And so that kind of became a bit of a snowball effect, and a few other people got involved. Sean and John, who are unfortunately not able to join us today. And we kind of became a little bit of a group. And then we started taking our messages of trying to cheer everybody up out onto the road. And so we, in 2018-19, we started appearing at various community conferences in the UK, which was great fun. Talking about security, but again, with a little bit of fun and humour thrown in for good measure. And then we kind of moved along from there a little bit during lockdown. It was a really tough period for everybody, whether you were in cybersecurity or not. It was a really grim period of time. And we set up a thing called Happy Hour, I beg your pardon, which was a Friday night thing. Every Friday night for months and months and months at 8 p.m. You could rock up at our Zoom chat, a bit like this one, and we'd have a drink and we'd have a laugh, and it'd go on for hours and hours and hours. Calling it happy hour was probably a little misleading. It was happy half a day in some examples. But it helped people. You know, it was a really open-spirited group, an open-spirited forum. Anybody could rock up, whether you were in cybersecurity or not, and just let off some steam and be part of something. And we know for a fact that it helped a lot of people out during that time. Also during that time, Scott came along and joined Beer Farmers version 2, I guess we were. And we were doing other things by that time. We were doing conferences. So we'd gone from just appearing at conferences, delivering talks, to actually putting events on ourselves. And we've done 4 events now in the time since that all happened, of which most of them were virtual to begin with. And then more recently in 2023, we did BeerCon 4, which was a hybrid event, but mostly it was in person. We did that inside the DTX Expo in London. We've had a few lineup changes. Lisa Forte and Nikki Webb joined us in. I struggle now because years kind of fly by, and you think, was it last year? Oh, it's 3 years ago, you know. But they joined us. Scott, you had family commitments and work commitments that meant that you had to move on, and similarly with Sean and John. And then earlier this year, we kind of called it. It run its course. I think it peaked really during lockdown, where we were having the most impact, I think. But we're all getting older and we've all got other commitments, families and jobs and all that kind of stuff. So we shelved the project. It may come back again another day. It's kind of pseudo come back again today because we're in the room on this call. But I think that is the best I could do as a potted history of the Beer Farmers. We did some good stuff. We enjoyed ourselves doing it. But hopefully the idea was we helped a lot of other people in the process, which was the primary motivation for it. I think I did it. I don't know if the other guys have got anything to add.
I agree.
I've got a few things to add because I think Mike has downplayed it. So I've never been hanging out with a bigger group of innovative, let's try it, let's figure it out. We were the first to do a 24/7 or a 24-hour around the world InfoSec 20-minute interviews with some of the biggest luminaries in the industry. Malware Jake, Tanya Janik, like a whole bunch of people that got together and were part of this excitement. We were the first to really do a complete live stream conference involving multiple speakers, and pioneered the idea of having a green room and then bringing people in, having a panel of like folks not to judge, but just to kind of have a live Q&A session. We did that from the Havelock studio. And then, at DTX, again, the pioneering stuff, and a huge shout out to all of the supporters like Dave Mack and Maya and everyone who said, there's no reason why we cannot live stream from a live event at the same time as putting on a bunch of talks on that particular stage. And to this day, like all of that innovation that's been done, really set the stage for, I think, making a conference a lot more of a community-driven get-together for both the virtual world and the physical world. And I think, that was groundbreaking at the time. I think it is still groundbreaking in a lot of ways, but all of the B-sides that have happened sort of after that now take that approach too, with sometimes live streaming talks at the same time there's an audience out there. So it just was great to be part of this really innovative, creative, and, Scott, we couldn't have gotten out of the starting gate without your dedication for a lot of the tech. That I had a room full of tech, and I like to tell people that Scott made it all work somehow.
I'm still not sure how I made it all work, but yeah, I do remember 4 a.m. cooking the midnight oil, connecting cables, and like restringing things.
I know what the problem is, and I know how to fix it.
Yes, that was a catchphrase. It was almost like the double down catchphrase that kept rearing its head. Like, I know what the problem is, and I'm going to double down and fix that.
Yeah, but in some cases it was like, okay, so this is great. Do you mind if I change it all? I've got to burn it to the ground and rebuild it. And you know what? Just like you rebuild servers, you get to that point where, I've tried every fix that I could find. You know what? It's just time to reinstall the operating system. So that's what Scotty did. He reinstalled the entire operating system before our go live date and worked on it till about 4 a.m. while I was busy upstairs drinking and ending up in a pile of my own sick. So,
I mean, all contributions are valid, right?
Hell yeah.
I mean, for what it's worth for me, I mean, I can definitely owe one career to you. Based on what happened at, both InfoSec Happy Hour and actually BeerCon 3 when it was live at DTX, right? From that, from me just chatting and like BeerCon 2 doing that's talk, it actually led me to work at Sonatype doing that for a living, right? So thank you for that. I think a lot of people at the time, I guess, in lockdown, there was actually, a lot of us that were studying different parts of cybersecurity and realizing that all these kind of talks that you'd normally, make a name, not make a name for yourself, but, get your, what you've been researching actually out there. The chance to do that was quite rapidly diminished because we couldn't go anywhere, right? And you're right, there wasn't any any of the kind of academic kind of places had kind of completely shut down to a certain extent. I remember going on runs at that point, going past Brighton Uni, and there were people actually genuinely locked in their rooms. They weren't actually allowed to leave their rooms, which is a shocking way. If you think about from a mental health, my perspective on it absolutely was necessary, especially the first one. I'm just going to make that clear. I'm not saying it was, it had to be done, but it obviously was hugely harmful for people's mental health to be in that situation.
Agreed. And I think from our point of view, from the happy hour stuff that we did, it was unintended consequences, a lot of it, because, the original intention of it was that we were just going to hang out. It was going to be a small group of us that would normally have met up at an event, perhaps in real life. That opportunity was completely removed. So why don't we just do something on a Friday for half a dozen people? And that's how it all started. The unintended consequence, however, was it helped facilitate careers, as you described there, Dan. It even facilitated marriage. Now, which is it still blows my mind to think that participants in that little humble group ultimately hooked up in real life, got together as in a romantic relationship, and ended up getting married with each other. And you think that is literally a life-changing thing that you've been a part of. contributed towards. And then you bring in, the mental health aspects of it, as you touched on there, and you think we could have actually saved lives. And I don't want to overplay it. Just pick Ian's point from earlier, but I do believe that it profoundly impacted people at a time when it was desperately needed. We're not out for any accolades or any of that sort of stuff, but it makes me feel like we did something really valuable. And it's all right sharing information, having a good time, and all the rest of it. But if you provided a safe haven for people that made them forget a little bit of the terror that was going on out there in the world, and again, it was for everybody, then for me, that's job done, guys.
Hey, look, I just want to say I've lost count of the amount of conferences I've been to where people have come up and gone, hey, have you got 5 minutes? InfoSec Happy Hour literally saved my life. I don't know what I would be doing without having the support on a Friday night to kind of come along judgment free, have a beer, or just not even have a beer, just come along judgment free, talk to someone and go, I'm not feeling too good. Like I'm struggling with, I live myself, my family are miles and miles away. They're in a different, remember it was like a different zone. Like you couldn't travel cross county. You couldn't even travel like a couple of miles to go and see your parents. And people were isolated. This gave them the ability to be less isolated, talk to friends, form the bonds. You mentioned marriage. Some people have made friends for life through it. And those friends helped save their life. I genuinely believe that. And we know for a fact because people will keep coming up to all of us to go, hey, thanks, because we really needed it. And you're right, we didn't do it for any accolades or, the medals and the, oh my God, the best podcast since 2022 or whatever it is. You don't care about that. We just did it because it was the right thing to do. And it helped us. Like it was a selfish thing. We wanted to help ourselves as well as everybody else. It just so happened to help a lot more people than what we intended. Holy shit! It blew up.
It did.
And
I think. Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think what we didn't anticipate was the fact that it would soon spread internationally. And I remember on one occasion, Scott was going and going, and when I got up in the morning, it was still going. It was really special and amazing. And we learned about how InfoSec is perceived in countries like Egypt and into Africa and in the Far East as well. I think Will Thomas, who went on to become Bushido Token or was Bushido Token, his career and his contacts were just so, I think, enhanced by the ability for us to reach international kind of like stature. But I think what Scott says is that when we're so isolated the way we we're in this position where we just needed to talk and we needed to express like what we were going through. And I think that encouraged very constructive conversations and not the typical kind of, bus driving that we've encountered, of late on platforms like X. It was really the community at one of its finest moments, I think.
Do you know what? I'm going to add to that as well, because this is something that I think we spoke about privately every week that Happy Hour ran, was the numbers just kept going up and up and up every week, right? And we weren't looking for additional numbers. That in fact, we were quite terrified about our Zoom license because the numbers did keep increasing. And there was one particular one I know it's jumped into Mike's brain of like, oh shit, that night was really, really busy. But the really, really cool thing was we had this Friday night call, hundreds of people would join it. Nobody muted. And nobody ended up talking over each other. I mean, there was like one instance, I think, where, we're all geeks. Like we all like mechanical keyboards, or some of us do, but we don't like hearing it through other people's microphones. So there was a few insulting of keyboards going on. Those times, yeah, sure, mute. Or when you're getting shouted at by your wife to shut the fuck up because you've been too loud, fine, mute yourself, that's cool. But the vast majority of people behaved. Like I've never been in a bigger Zoom call with everybody's unmuted. I mean, we did a family call on the Sunday with like 6 people, and it was just carnage. You could hear everything. There was like not just typing, like people breathing down the microphone and stuff. And like we've got like a couple of hundred people on a call, and everyone's been super civilized, super chill. Hey, I see your point, but I disagree with you. But because it's going to get heated, let's just move on. I was blown away.
Yeah. There was a lot of decorum. It didn't start that way.
No.
Which is kind of, I guess, the essence of part of why we're here with you, Dan, today, which is about security in this kind of environment. Because when we'd come up with the idea of happy hour, it wasn't called happy hour, by the way. It was just called, shall we get on a call on Friday evening and have a beer? That's kind of its name. Not massively catchy, admittedly. It became happy hour when we wanted to encourage other people to get involved. But we launched it as a thing. So Zoom was relatively new at the time, and Zoom as a technology was finding its feet both in terms of its features, its security, and its licensing modeling.
Yeah.
We abused every part of that to begin with. Okay, so we started happy hour, and we went on social media. We went on Twitter. I will refuse point blank till the end of my days to call it anything other than Twitter. And we said, hey, we're doing a thing. Everybody's welcome. Come along and join us. Here's the joining details. Post.
Oops.
And that went out to, well, literally the entirety of Twitter sphere, because all of us have fairly healthy followings on social media, and that amplifies and amplifies and amplifies, right? We made a little bit of a fundamental mistake. We sent out the joining details, including the meeting ID and the meeting password, publicly, without any thought. So we call ourselves information security professionals. Open the debate, I think, because we posted this out on social media, and then 8 p.m. on the very first evening, we sat there in this little Zoom call, wondering if anybody had turned up. And they did. And we had a few familiar faces rock up, you know, hiya John and hiya Jeff and so on and so forth. And well, this is getting quite cozy. And a few more people turned up that were unknown. And we thought, well, we did put it out. You know, we're getting people from all walks of life, infotech life, whatever, joining our meeting. And then a few more. And then a few more. And then dozens more. And dozens more on top of that. And we thought, wow, this is popular. But it started to kind of dawn on me, at least, that we didn't recognize any of these people. Not one of them seemed like anybody we knew or vaguely knew on Twitter.
Oh, crikey.
And we thought, well, we'll just carry on anyway. And this was a few minutes in, literally only a few minutes in, by which time, and I talk about Zoom's flaky licensing model at the time, there wasn't really a licensing model. You could have as many people in the Zoom call as you wanted. And we did. And they were all porn bots.
Yeah.
And they were all Russian porn bots. And you could start hearing all of this Russian being spoken in various parts of the chat. And then all of a sudden these screens started being shared of all sorts of really inappropriate material, I think is the best way I can describe it. And obviously we realized that we'd been Zoom bombed, which didn't have a name at the time. It pretty soon did after. So we killed that call and then started a new one and pushed out the meeting invite with the username, with the meeting ID and the password in it again, expecting a different outcome. And we didn't get a different outcome. We got all the same people coming back in, sharing pornographic material and all that sort of stuff. On the third attempt, we asked people to DM us directly if they'd like to join. So we learned that lesson. Direct messages on social media if you want to join. We can moderate, at least view who you are asking. And guess what? By the third attempts, we'd got the meeting up and running with actual human beings in it that weren't necessarily evil scammers. So that happened. The moral of that story was, A, behave like a security professional if you purport to be one. But more importantly, to any lay user out there, be very careful about sharing sensitive information, because an outcome like that is what you can expect if you don't.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? And I guess the third one is even if you do work in security, everyone makes mistakes, and kind of that's all right as well. How do you know about these things? Well, actually, you know about them because you get experience, and my experience of remembering backups is that I deleted a production database once, right? It's without a backup,
Yep.
Great. I guess so Zoom bombing is what the term is now. So I guess for people that aren't maybe not familiar, I guess that's the same as photo bombing, right? But with people joining your Zoom chat, and they get that because in the Zoom URL, the actual passcode is actually embedded into it. So if you actually share that URL, then you're already giving them the key to the safe, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what was interesting is there weren't the granular controls that there are today in terms of the privacy and security aspect. It was kind of an open platform, and they were making it up as they went along. And so, we adopted it mostly because it was very inexpensive. It was new technology, and we wanted to see if it worked or not. Well, it worked. It worked phenomenally well, maybe too well.
Yeah, I guess, and that's the difference between usability and security, right? Sometimes things are secure, people can't use them, so they make it easier, right? It's hard.
I think in the context of this chat, I think it's important to point out something fundamental, that you don't know who you're dealing with on the internet. That might sound like a really elementary thing to say as a security pro, but you don't. And that applies to whether you're working in a business environment or a business context, or whether you're at home with your family and your kids are operating online, which all of our children, for those of us that have kids, are all operating online in one way or another nowadays. You don't know who it is you're dealing with absolute certainty. And the less experience you have with dealing with people online, the higher you are at risk of dealing with somebody that is really unwanted in your life. Okay. So what we experienced in that Zoom bomb was a whole bunch of foreign bad guys wanting to come in and effectively take over our audience with their materials, and then get people to click on things in that meeting and go off to places where they could give up their personal information or just view content that's just not appropriate content. That happens all the time under different guises. It happens when you befriend somebody on social media, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, whatever. They're all at risk of the same problem. A scammer or a catfish. Go look it up, audience. If you've watched the TV show Catfish, you'll know roughly what we're talking about. Bad people doing bad things online. They come in all shapes and sizes, but they hit you up often on social media, coming as a friend when they're not even the person that they appear to be in their profile. They're out to do bad stuff. At best, they might be just out to steal your money. I say at best because at worst, they might be out to do some really, really bad, nasty things to either you, your loved ones. Okay. So that's a lesson I want to put out for the benefit of the audience at large. Be careful who you're interacting with, because you cannot be 100% certain they are who they purport to be.
So that's actually a good point as well, because I remember there was a couple of nights where it hit, the midnight mark, and you'd clearly had enough, and it's like, I'm going to bed. Sean had enough too, because he's got like a couple of kids, and he said, and the dogs are just barking, so he's like, fuck it, I'm going to bed. Ian had the same moment of, fuck it, I'm going to bed. So it was left to me. And there was a couple of moments where like people would join past midnight, or people would join well into the early hours on this app here, but they would join and they would have the cameras off, and it would just be a name, and you'd recognize the name, but there's no verification there. So it was like, okay, I'm trusting this is actually Ian Thornton Trump that's joined. Hey, are you able to type something? Are you able to turn your camera on? Now, I'm not a big fan of people that go, you must turn your camera on to be here, but sometimes there was discussions happening where people are like, hey, I'm not comfortable sharing the fact that I'm really vulnerable just now in a room full of people I don't know, and this might not actually be Ian that's joined. The vast majority of times, I don't think we threw anyone out that wasn't who they claimed to be, but it was that extra bit of trust going, I recognize that name, I know who you are, but I can't verify that it's you unless you send me a message over a communication method that I'm comfortable with, referencing an event that I know that only you know about, or turning your camera on. Now, this is before AI deepfake could just join a Zoom meeting and scam everybody. So luckily enough, we were okay there. But yeah, trust but verify.
Yeah, and you're right, absolutely right. And bullying and harassment and stalking are not new concepts to the world. Unfortunately, they've been around forever. However, the technology does act as an enabler. Okay, it's not the fault of technology. Okay, it's like saying a knife is the root cause of somebody being stabbed. It's not. It's people that are at the root cause of all of the good things in life and not so good things in life. But technology is a powerful tool in the hands of both good and bad individuals. So I think that's important to really call out, that the technology has got to a point now where it's made it eminently much easier for people to do bad stuff with it. And as we see artificial intelligence start to become more of a thing, okay, some people view it as a bit of a gimmick, a bit of a white elephant. It has its uses. And like any other tool, it has uses for good and it has uses for evil. And this is where we're seeing things like AI being used to pretend to be somebody else. The whole deepfake thing in the hands of governments and stuff. You think, well, okay, it's the stuff of James Bond. But actually, it's very cheap. The barrier to entry to this is very low to go and pretend to be somebody else to create things like voice notes, or to be able to create things like very basic videos. For the uninitiated, and hell, even to some of the people that are experts, it's hard to spot whether it's real or not. So this is where technology is, the genie's out of the bottle, I'm afraid. But it means that people have got to be even more diligent and on guard when they're operating online.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Like, as technology advances, it gets harder and harder to actually see. I'll be honest. Sometimes with AI, generated images, you can notice the differences still, and I think it is quite obvious when you do. You see 6 fingers instead of 5, but it's actually when you're glancing at things, it's so hard to actually, maybe doom scrolling is a great example, right? You see all this stuff, and then when you actually look at it hard enough, you realize a lot of it's fake. But
well, people fall for phishing attacks down all the time, and they're not sophisticated. No effort has gone into them, really. A lot of effort goes into AI scams.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise really that people don't spot them when they're already falling for relatively easy phishing attacks that have just got words in them.
Okay.
Hey man, I nearly lost my house deposit 2 years ago. I mean, I deal in cybersecurity. I ended up being like the police figurehead a couple of years ago for anti-scam stuff, and doing the whole Take 5 campaign, and don't click a link, and definitely don't do that. And if you're conveyancing or you're buying a house, then definitely don't do that. I was buying a house. I was in the middle of it. I was in a different country. I was really jet lagged. I was stressed about buying the house. There was a lot going on. And all of a sudden I get a link in going, hey, by the way, we need additional checks on your deposit. Obviously I clicked the link because it's exactly what's going on. It can happen to every single one of us. So just a slight tangent, but backing off the back of what Mike said, I get really angry when you hear people going, hey, it's only stupid people that fall for it. It's just right place, right time. I was in the wrong frame of mind, or the right place for the scammers to actually, and how they knew I was buying a house at the time, that's still a question I've never got an answer on. It doesn't sit well with me, but fine. But I was in the right place at the right time for them, and I was in the wrong mindset headspace because I was tired and I was trying to get this house sale through and trying to deal with legal documents. I had no idea what the fuck half the language said.
Yeah,
I'm going to click that link twice.
Yeah,
I echo exactly what Scott said. I was in a situation where
perfect timing, comedy timing.
Every time this happens, every time we need to trust but verify he's not actually frozen as a joke.
It's his famous goldfish impression, that one, isn't it?
So I have to echo what Scott just said, because I got very close to giving remote access to a threat actor who was using a very convincing banking site. And the only reason it sort of gave me pause was when I was trying to install the tool that they were going to use for that remote access to, quote, whitelist my device. It's really difficult to do that on a Mac. There's a whole bunch of security permissions that I have to give that. And I started thinking, because, I was trying to figure out how to give those. Wait a second here. Am I about to get, scammed by these guys? So, yeah, I mean, this was I got dangerously close too. And we're supposed to be the professionals, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a really good point. It's Mike. Oh, Mike's had to. I think Mike's connection's gone now. That was bloody awesome. Thank you so much for joining today. It's been a revelation, and hopefully, there's been some really good knowledge shared between that. So, I'd just like to thank Ian, Scott, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us for our Christmas special. Is there anything in particular, each of you, that you'd like to add to your Christmas wish list of things that would just go away?
Oh, wow. I think maybe scammers and fraudsters. I would really like them to go away in 2025.
It's good shout, Scott.
I'll go with, if we can outlaw leaf blowers, that would be perfect. But failing that, I would echo Ian. Just Christmas is a shitty time for a lot of people. There's a lot of shit that goes on. There's a lot of sadness. There's also a lot of happiness. It's exactly the same as, me being in a different country trying to buy a house, and just a lot going on. People get, wrapped up in all that shit, and it's easy to kind of lose your way and then click a link or send money or do something. But stop, verify, trust but verify. It is this person that's texting me, but I'm going to double check it's this person texting me asking me for 50 quid. If you're sending stuff in the post, etc., don't send cash, send checks, these kind of things. I'd like scammers to disappear in 2025.
Good call as well. So Mike's back with us. Thank you. I don't know what happened there. Maybe some technical issues, but so the final question we just asked everyone else: if there was one thing that you could get rid of on your Christmas list, as in eradicate, what would you go for?
Oh, wow. Great question. It could well be a very long list, but you asked me for one thing, so it might require a bit of explanation, but I'll try anyway. I think I'd like to see the end of social media in its current form.
Fantastic.
Now, I'm of a vintage where I remember life when social media didn't exist. And of course, it meant that people interacted in person far more. You had a closer friends network because they were physically your friends and you would hang out with your friends. I think even more family time was spent together before social media. Maybe because you had nothing else to do, nothing better to do, but nevertheless, it was still, the family unit was probably more communicative then than perhaps it is today. So that's one reason. But then obviously the other reasons are the state that it's allowed itself, or its proprietors or its owners have allowed it to get into over the past decade plus, whereby it's become effectively quite a dangerous environment for lots and lots of different reasons, for lots and lots of different people. So whether it's things like online harassment and bullying and stalking, which we touched on earlier in the conversation, or whether it's the wholesale spreading of misinformation and disinformation like we're seeing on a very, very regular basis at government level, at nation state level. Now, as a cyber professional, I struggle to understand what's real and what's true anymore in this world of information. So to the average person in the street, it must be hellish difficult to understand what they're being told is true or otherwise. So I think that is really the one big thing I'd like to see uninvented, and maybe then reimagined and reinvented in a different way, in a different spirit, in a more of a community spirit. Because there is a saying, Dan, and the saying is that guns don't kill people, people kill people. And that's fair, except that the gun helps. And the point I'm getting at really is that we see a lot of commentary about social media being not the problem, it's the people on it. And that is true. But the social media enables that behavior. It makes it easier for people to behave in the way they behave. So it lowers the barrier of entry for negative behaviors in the same way that putting a gun in someone's hand enables them to carry out a fatal act with that weapon that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to do. So it's a kind of a long-winded answer, but I thought it needed a little bit of an explanation. So there you go.
No, I would agree with a lot of that. I mean, I do spend a lot of time on various social media, but it's come a long way since, I guess, my first interaction with social media of IRC, right? Where you'd sit in different forums, you'd chat, you wouldn't know if the person was, same mate with me, I was 13 at that point. You didn't know if they were 13, whether they were 40. All of those problems still existed. But the ability for it to govern your life was a little bit different, right? I know that I used to check in, check out of that, and I think that's it. I guess the addictive nature of a lot of software in general, anti-patterns are well known, and that combined with it kind of constantly being on your life. I've got a friend of mine doesn't touch it at all, but unfortunately gets very upset that we forget to text him when we're going out and stuff. And it's
but in some ways that ignorance is actually bliss. If I think about it and reflect back on the last 30 years of my life in technology, technology is the great enabler. Obviously, that's a historical fact. It's allowed so many good things to happen in life, but it's also allowed so many bad things to happen in life. And I guess you've got to take the rough with the smooth to a point. However, what we don't see enough of is actions or acts of responsibility being taken by the people that provide this technology. It's almost a case of we built it, whatever you do with it's not our problem. It's not our fault. And you see it when you look at the big net. I'm done really well so far not to name any of the brands.
Done very well, yes.
So I don't think I need to, because they're all as guilty as each other, quite frankly. So when they don't care about your privacy in the way that we know they don't care about your privacy because their advertising revenue depends on the lack of privacy, okay? When laws aren't actually impactful enough to stop this behavior at a corporate level, when we see things like the GDPR come in that was all dead exciting and we all had to do a lot of work to get ready for it, it's had almost no impact for good in improving people's privacy. We're seeing data breaches at the same levels that we saw, if not more than 5-10 years ago. That's just getting worse and worse, and it will continue to do so. Organizations are not being held to account in any way that's appropriate for their behaviors in terms of tackling privacy issues. So if they're not tackling privacy and they're not caring about the fines because they're minuscule, or indeed they don't end up paying them at all, then how are they ever going to care about safety? So this is the problem, and this is where I think that governments need to take more responsibility to hold these organizations to account, not hide behind things like taxation and the fact that they employ people in your country and all that kind of thing. We're talking about people's lives and safety and well-being, and for me that's paramount above all else. Above all convenience, above all this, that and the other, the well-being of individuals is paramount.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been really good to get the band back together. And if you liked this episode or any of the other episodes, please don't forget to donate to Refuge UK, justgiving.com, 0n1ydan5, only Dan's.
Links will be in the video.
They will most certainly, as they are on the bio bit in YouTube as well. So thanks ever so much, everyone, and see you soon.